right, so 12:03, so we should be good. So hey everybody, I'm Jay Longley. Appreciate y'all joining this. We'll be making this more interactive over the next hour or so. Feel free to be a part of this. Normally organizations make things as webinars. We're making this as a meeting instead of a webinar. So I encourage you to raise your hand, use a chat. I've got some people on my team here. We can always interrupt the conversation and really just guide it where the questions are, right? So I want to make it interactive, as much as interactive as possible. We're also going to be doing live demos. I'm a big fan of live demos, but with live demos, things can go wrong. So just be aware of that. And because it's a live demo, I'm not clicking into a slide and then you're immediately prompted with things. So it'll take some time to log into some portals, wait for some search results, show you the dark web, things like that. During those portions, Manny will talk a little bit and certainly fill in. And then Manny and I will be bouncing things back and forth a lot. So with that, I'm going to introduce Manny, my counterpart. Manny, over to you.
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate the time today. My name is Manuel Lobao, Director of Cybersecurity Compliance Services for Envision Technology Advisors. Have now actually a bit of a typo. It's actually 30 years of experience in technology, better part of the past decade, specifically around cybersecurity. Obviously, I have some different accolades and different capabilities, but my history is really coming back and working with some great organizations. Had the opportunity to work with security services with 20 of the top Fortune 100 organizations in the world, and being able to provide security services to them, everything from kind of red teaming, penetration testing, security service implementation, governance, risk, and compliance, and specifically also even around those more delicate topics such as incident response whenever we have a security breach or practice there. Obviously jumping in and getting involved and helping organizations kind of recover and navigate the landscape there. And obviously I'd like to turn back over to Jay and really appreciate your time today.
Hey everybody, thanks Manny. So I am Jay Longley. I know many of you, some of you I don't know, so I'll do a quick introduction. So I've been in technology more than 27 years, actually going on 29 this year. For more than half my career, though, I was a CEO of an organization, so I can speak to it at varying levels of organizational needs, right? So I've been a certified engineer. I started out as that back in the mid-90s. And today I'm still a certified engineer. So my focus more so since I've sold my business has largely been on cybersecurity and AI. But since the late 90s and early 2000s, I really had a very heavy focus on cybersecurity, which I think will ring true as you see here today. So why are we here today, right? So we're going to discuss quite a few different things. We're going to try to keep it streamlined and really just moving forward because the demos, I think, is a fun part, right? Start off with the regulatory compliance discussion. What that is 20 years ago, organizations that were just mentioning, the cyber guys were really the ones, the IT guys were raising their hands saying, we need additional funding for antivirus. We need a better firewall. We need additional capabilities. And that shifted over the past, 20 years, actually even over the past 3 or 4 years, where it shouldn't be the technology team that's actually asking for the funding. It really should be the business regulations that are driving it, the laws that are, the laws of the land. You chose to open your business in the state, you chose to accept credit cards. Those laws really drive, the requirements that the cyber team should be putting in place. We're going to discuss your data. We'll show you a little bit about my data, some demo data. We're going to show you how to tell if your data is safe. And then we're going to actually take some data, stick it on the dark web, and I'll show you how it interfaces with threat actors. And if you have access to the dark web, you can go out to my site. We'll show you how to get there. You can actually take a look at the stuff that's compliant and not compliant too. So we're going to show you quite a bit today. Hopefully it's fun. So let's jump into it. So with this, I'm going to stop my share for a minute. And again, I'm going to jump back and forth with sharing. So you'll see that a bit. There's going to be a lot of shifting screens and moving around. So just bear with us because, again, I believe in live demos. But for here at this, what we're going to talk about right now is governance, risk, and compliance, right? That's really the business regulatory conversation. For that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Manny to give us a high level on what GRC is.
Absolutely. So when we think of GRC, obviously, you just stated governance, risk, and compliance. The governance part is our oversight, our ability to understand what's happening within our organization and the visibility of the activities taking place. The risk part is probably the most important part. When we think of GRC, it's kind of little g, big R, little c. The risk portion is the risk to the business. That's our overall security posture. It's risk of data exposure. It's risk of falling into regulatory constraints and maybe having fines associated with them. We think of compliance, a lot of times C, the compliance part, ends up a lot of times driving the conversation. The compliance portion in many cases can become a checkbox, and that is the danger. Being compliant does not mean being secure. Having a strong security practice, having things in line, and following a good security framework will adhere itself, and the compliance portion becomes a residual effect, a result of the proper implementation. But the compliance component is really when you start to dive into things, whether it be specific compliance requirements such as maybe like a HIPAA, NERC, FISMA, PCI, but then you get into regulatory compliances related to your local state, municipality. You get into countries, because even though we may be doing business out of a particular state, as soon as we're doing business with an individual that has residency in other states or possibly residency overseas in other countries, we automatically get pulled into those compliance requirements as well. So again, while we're talking about compliance and talking about those regulatory bodies, we really want to focus on the risk conversation, because the risk conversation and identification of risk and risk mitigation is going to drive us into being properly compliant and fall into those better categories.
So with GRC, why organizations need it largely is you want to avoid legal trouble, right? You as a business chose, as Minnie was mentioning, you chose to work in certain municipalities or certain countries or in certain verticals or accept certain types of data. So you want to avoid, legal trouble around that data. You want to protect your reputation, and you want to improve decision making, plus stay competitive, right? You want to follow the guidelines that the organization has chosen to become a part of. Now, whether you realize or not, the data that you're accepting, has compliance requirements around it. And you may say that, hey, we're not a PCI compliant organization, yet you're accepting credit cards to pay for invoices. Well, guess what? You're accepting PCI data. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Another major item to talk about with GRC is avoiding penalties too. So fines or sanctions, operational restrictions like losing licenses to operate, and loss of customer trust. So all of those are really the business drivers, business decisions, and business has made to create sales, to move the business forward, to grow it. Now, IT is tasked with complying to it, adhering to it, and how do you prove that? And that's what we're really going to talk about today. So as part of that, the GRC discussion, we're going to discuss data both inside and outside, like the four walls of the organization, right? And show of hands if you can. Everybody has the little raised hand on there. Did everybody here know that you can actually track your data anywhere in the world and revoke access to it? And the tools are actually available in most businesses already. So show of hands. A lot of people already know that, aware of that. I'm aware of it. So, and we'll dive into that today, which is good. So really just today is about bringing light to that. Another thing to note too is the tools that are in most organizations. Most organizations don't actually have to pay any extra for it. So that's a great part, right? Some do, right? Some require an additional license here or there, but in most organizations, that license is there. Now have that understanding. With that understanding, think of all the breaches that have happened lately. I'm not going to call some super hyper local ones here within Rhode Island, but think of that. Think of having the ability to track that data and revoke access to that data no matter where it lives. You can determine if it's valid and viable for this person to open it, but you can also get alerted if somebody else tries to open it and then revoke access to it. We're going to show you that. We're going to show you that in the dark web.
I think the key is a lot of times when we think about protecting data and having control of our data, we think about it within our four walls. When it's inside of our four walls, we have a lot of controls we can put around it, and we can determine who has access, where it is, and who can do what with it. But what this is really referring to, and what Jay's going to be really demonstrating, is how that four walls get expanded out globally. So that is just follows the contents wherever it proceeds to go.
Excellent. Yeah. So, and on the topic of GRC, so governance is not a new term. right? It's been in the industry for a long time. It's now part of the NIST cybersecurity framework. Cybersecurity framework is something that we've aligned our organization to. Some align their organizations to ISO 27001. There's many different compliance frameworks or regulatory frameworks that organizations can become a part of. So compliance is not something new. It's just really governance and compliance is really a big focus point at this point. Now, many organizations that we've been working with lately actually have the idea that they are not in a compliant industry. We touched on this earlier, but yet they are accepting compliant related data. A lot of them are actually saying, okay, well, we accept credit cards, we accept them through Square, right? We are going to health source RI, but RI is not actually holding the data, Deloitte is holding the data, right? In those cases, who's tasked with securing the data, right? Well, the main organization that's accepting it is primarily responsible for it. So if I chose as an organization to accept credit card data, but I chose Square as my vendor, guess what? It's my responsibility to ensure that Square is upholding the contracts that I have in place with them. They're following my requirements, and if they're not, it's up to me to find another one. Right? So have that understanding. We're also going to focus on the cyber portion of this. We'll talk about regulations and regulatory information along the way, but we're not going to focus on the, as part of HIPAA, for example. HIPAA has requirements to physically lock cabinets, and track, who has the key and who's opened up the server room. We're not going to focus on the physical access to different portions of this. We're going to really dive into the technical, the cyber aspects of it. HIPAA also requires you to have data at rest encryption. But is data at rest encryption enough if a server's turned on, right? And data in transit encryption, again, is that enough, right? Because as you can see, a lot of threat actors will get into systems, pull data from a live up and running server, get around those restrictions. So we'll focus on those areas again, cyber, not physical. And with that, let's start talking about data, right? Now, data can be anything. Data can be the data that you accept, credit card orders, bank account numbers for payroll, right? It can be, or it can be data that you create. And the data that you create can be things like your emails, your PDFs, your resumes, you're filling out online forms. It can be that as well, right? So there's all different data. And some of this data falls under regulatory compliance, and some of it doesn't, right? So we're not saying everything falls under that, and we'll show you a little bit about that too. But a good thing to know is that you have the tools to see which regulation really is requiring this. And you also have the ability to find out which file falls under the compliance. And for those of you with good, may you have something to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the key point is that there's a lot of data that we can consider sensitive, and I think easy to identify off the top of our head sometimes. Social security number, a credit card number, personal information for an individual. And a lot of times we can put policies or procedures in place to say, okay, we're not going to store credit card information. And for the most part, you may not. But I think the difficulty is, how do you enforce that? How do you ensure that that's not actually happening? What visibility do you have to make sure that someone hasn't actually clicked on a file or saved it somewhere? Maybe it's synchronized into your tenant that contains this sensitive data and sensitive content. And that's what we really want to be able to have you experience, is that you have the ability in a lot of these platforms that you have available at your fingertips to be able to have a better understanding about that level of data exposure that's not anticipated, that we believe to have planned around, but how do you have that oversight? How do you have that governance and understanding of where it is today?
And that's a critical component of it, right? Because we have a lot of organizations that come to me and say, I don't have sensitive data, I don't collect this, yet they have employees and we can prove it, right? So here's part of that proof. So anybody that has access to Microsoft 365 to their Purview can go to purview.microsoft.com. And once you're in Purview, again, live demo, so I'm not pre-recorded screens. Hopefully Microsoft works and loads properly. Once you get into Purview, you can go into Information Protection. You can go into Explorers. Now you can go into Content Explorer. Content Explorer, as it pulls up, what it'll do is it'll show me the information that I have contained within my demo site. And again, this is just a demo site if it loads. The information is categorized under a bunch of different areas. It can be your Exchange data, your SharePoint data, your OneDrive data, and it's grouped under there. On the center portion of it that is failing to load, you can actually see that if it's US data for social security numbers or driver's license numbers or things like that. Let me see if I can pull it into a different screen, if we
Uh,
can reload it.
Yeah, so something to note is obviously you need to have the proper rights within your tenant. You have visibility of what's going on inside of your tenant. In this case, we're using Microsoft as an example here. There are the abilities to extend that to on-premise file servers if you have file stores that are on-premise, so they can be scanned and bring that into visibility. And a lot of these are kind of out-of-the-box detection algorithms, but there's a lot of also more detail. And there you go, Jay. It looks like it loaded. I bought you enough
Did,
time.
yeah. So no, I appreciate that. So as you can see here, I have multiple files in Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint and whatnot. Here's part of where I'm proving that I have sensitive data. Now I can go in here and I can type in u.s. And again, demo site, I see that I have driver's license numbers, 94 of them actually. If I click on it, I've got 11 of them in Exchange, 54 in SharePoint, 29. Now, that's sensitive data, right? And that driver's license falls under Massachusetts 201 CMR 17, right? So that's a compliance set that I should follow, right? We can take a look at credit. I have credit card numbers. And within my system, you can see I have 2 or 3 on my Exchange, and I have to look around my camera, so bear with me. And I've got 23 on a OneDrive. So this portal, part of Microsoft 365, looks at the data that I've connected to it, but it can also extend it to other areas too. Just for intense purposes of this demo, I only have it connected to Microsoft 365, but we can extend compliance across multiple areas to see it. Right? And that, let me ask this. Because this is a demo tenant, do I have to secure this information? Anybody? I'm going to say yes, right? But here's the thing. Most organizations say, well, you know, we don't fall under Massachusetts 201 CMR 17 or Rhode Island's Identity Theft Protection Act. Like those don't apply to us, or HIPAA doesn't apply to us. Yet I have information that is about diseases, you know, because somebody called in or they're getting a surgery or something like that. So most organizations don't think that they have to secure this information because they're not in a regulated industry. Yet they hold regulated data. And you can see that I have regulated data within this. So not only do I have this in there and not just staged for this, I guarantee you that you have it in there, and here's why. We do these tenant assessments for organizations. It doesn't matter if you're Microsoft Shop or not, right? We've done them for schools, and here's one that's very hyper-local, a school that is a Google-only school. Administration's on Google, the students are on Google. However, the Windows computers are here and there spaced throughout the organization, the school, right? The Microsoft 365 environment that the school was given was free. They were given to it. The administrator of that system opened it up wide. They brought the security score from a whatever it is by default down to a 1%, not 100% secure, a 1% insecure. And they installed a Minecraft server on there, right? Giving it open and access to thousands of kids, so they can go and play and have fun and enjoy that. Because again, they're a Google school. But here's the problem: the secretary for the superintendent decided to synchronize her computer up to that 365 tenant. During that portion of her synchronizing it over the course of however many months, she was synchronizing over 10,000 files that had social security numbers, PII, PHI, and all of that massive data leakage issue that we caught during one of our assessments before it became an issue. We let them know about it. But the person that's the administrator there is a Harvard-trained CISSP, Harvard-educated person. And while they have a lot of tasks on their system, even the best security minds out there need reassurance and need testing from other third parties as well. So again, I guarantee that every organization has this data, whether it's in a silo that we can see very easily or not, and that's to be determined, right? But now that we've discussed data, let's discuss how we can secure it. And when it's properly configured, the systems almost do all of the work, right? And that's where the tools really are out there to help you fix it and fix those mess ups, right? In that example with this, if the secretary, if they had this framework in place, that again, they had the tools, right? She was synchronizing her data there. The tools sit in 365. If they had the tools properly configured, it would have identified the sensitive information and wrapped the regulatory compliance around it. It would have encrypted the data. It would have made it so they could track it, revoke access to it, and they didn't have that, right? So how does it do that? Right? How does it find the data and wrap those compliance around it. Well, let's start talking about identities, right? That's the foundational element. What's an identity? I'm Jay Longley. I work on this computer that we're connected with. I have a username and password that gets me on it. And most people think that gets you on a network, that's your identity, but it's not, right? In a centralized identity manner, the identities also include things like devices, right? So this computer is part of my identity. This phone that's within proximity of my computer is part of my identity. The fact that I'm in Rhode Island today, and I also work from and live in Costa Rica this past year, and I also work and live down in Bahamas from time to time. That's part of my identity, right? So it's a platform understands who I am, the devices I'm touching, and the places I'm working from. And that's going to be important for later, so make sure you know that. Also, as part of that, it understands my nuance. It understands in any given week I might touch 50 files, or my average maybe 500 files. Really doesn't matter, but everybody's different, so it understands how I work. If I start working in different manners, if I work from a new location, I start accessing a whole bunch of data that I didn't try to access before, it challenged me to prove that I am Jay Longley, and it does that through various methods. Again, know that because that'll be very critical when it comes to the dark web. So if I'm also trying to copy files in bulk, as if I was going to leave or exit a company, like it's going to know that. It's going to alert on that. Jay's acting in a behavior that's not necessarily how he normally acts. Let's challenge him to say, let's re-authenticate him, re-authenticate me through one of my varying methods. And now that we understand identity, right? Jay, the devices I'm touching, the locations I'm working from, let's talk about labeling, and more specifically, labeling your data. And we'll show you that in a second. What does labeling do? Labeling allows you to own your data anywhere, no matter where it goes. It can be on the regular web, it can be on Manny's cell phone, it can be on your home computer right now, it can be anywhere. And if it's my data that I've labeled, I can reach into your system when you try to access my data, and I can revoke your access to it, right? Now, I do that with a thing called labeling. So my identity is a portion of it, and labeling is the next portion of it. Now, what is a label? A label is a tag of data, a bit of information that we stick within every Word file, every email, every PDF, every bit of data that allows it. And that tag of data, what it does is anytime you go to open up that email or that PDF or that Excel document or Word document, that tag of data inspects the world around it. It says, I'm on this computer at this location. This person's logged in. Does this person have access to open me? It takes all that information in a fraction of a second, sends it up to the Microsoft Cloud that we're looking at right here. And if the answer is yes, it allows me to open the file, right? Which is key. If the answer is no, then I can't, right? And not only does it not allow me to open the file, I have the ability to reject the file, encrypt it on the fly. I have the ability to change the labels. If my information has been stolen and it's been labeled, I can revoke access to that information anywhere, right? And that's the key. So I own my own data, and I'm showing you how we own our data and how we prove it. So with that, I'll show you a couple of quick things as part of a demo. So I have two sensitivity labels, a general and a highly confidential one. General allows me to send emails outside of my organization. Everything is tagged, as general for emails. And every Word document, PDF, whatever I have is created as highly confidential, because generally this is my demo tenant. I don't want things to go out beyond it. So I'll keep everything highly confidential within that. You can auto label things. As it goes out, it's automatically labeled general or highly confidential, whatever works for your organization. And with that,
yeah, I think it's, and I think, Jay, it's key as part of this too, is that when you're doing the labels themselves can be tied in with all of these other architectures. So the combination of who you are, where you're logging in from, the information that's the device you're logging in from, can make a determination to say what action should be applied. And then based on the data sensitivity, the content that's being detected in the data that's being transmitted, to add even that additional layer of telemetry to determine what to do with that. And as you mentioned, like here with some of the auto tagging, You can have it set up as highly confidential for something that contains a credit card number. And then you can make a determination even further to say, you know what? I don't want credit card numbers coming into my system. So if an email comes in the system detects it as containing a credit card, I don't even want it to be received. You can just outright reject it and say, I do not want this exposure into my environment, into my tenant. So you have a lot of those steps and capabilities based on the context of the data, where it's coming from, who you are, and how it's originating, and where it's being accessed from.
And it's a phenomenal set of tools. So we've talked about what's the driving factor. The laws are governance, risk, and compliance. We've talked about the data, owning it, your identity to prove you are who you are. We're talking about labeling, that tag of data that looks at everything. All of this we're going to touch on again. But I just want to show you this because I think this is relevant. So here in my emails, it's automatically set to general. I can send it out to anybody. Some of you already have labels, which is great. Highly confidential is for everything internal. So I'll send myself, my Envision, Jay Longley at Envision. This is going to be just a general email test. And I put in the subject line general, and I'll show you as it comes through on the other side. I'll create another one. Highly confidential, Jay. And Envision, highly confidential. And I'll send that over. So many of you have already seen this portion, right? You already have it. Some of you that don't, phenomenal tool set, right? Not only do I have this in Microsoft Outlook, you have the ability to do this within Word. Let's take a look at Word and Excel. We'll look at Excel because it's already open. So I can go right into a blank workbook. I have sensitivity label, and I can create data that's only accessible within my organization, right? Or I can just say, look, I'm not sure if it should go outside my organization or inside. I'm going to give it a general label today, and say my organization gets attacked and everything gets stolen. Just because it's labeled as general today doesn't mean somebody on the dark web can actually view it, right? As soon as they open up the file, it inspects the world around them. On this computer, this place in the world, does this person have access to OpenMe? I've changed the label in the cloud because I knew I was under attack. It's no longer general. Anybody can open it. Now it's encrypted. Now it's alerting me, right? So I have the power to do that. Now, you have the ability, not just because you have these that you have to stay with them, you have the ability to be very flexible with it. So again, same thing as in Word. I don't have Word open right now, so we'll skip that one. But I want to show you something I think that's really valuable. You can see right here, highly confidential PDF, right? It's just a Word document. It's not a PDF, but this is for example. Highly confidential, it's labeled it. You can see right there, it's tagged. Here's my ability to track and revoke access. Critical, right? If I wanted to revoke access to a document, I can track at any point and revoke access. But I've saved this. I've labeled it within Word, and now I've saved it as a PDF. Right? We all do. We create resumes, do whatever with PDFs, right? You can see using Microsoft Edge, I'm able to open up that document because I'm authorized, I'm allowed to. Within that fraction of a second, I looked at my computer, I'm on this computer, this place in the world, can Jay open me? Yes, because Edge is information protection aware. It respects those labels I put on it, right? And that's critical to know because if I decide I want to open it with, we'll say Firefox, Firefox is not information protection aware. So that document can't inspect the world around it and say, yes, can Jay open me because it's not information protection aware. It doesn't respect that. So what the document does is it puts up this page and doesn't let the person trying to view it actually view it, right? So again, a lot of power with it. A question that we often get, schools, how should schools be changed around? And we touched on them earlier, and this isn't a school conversation by any means. This is a business conversation, but schools is a pretty relevant point. Administration, we believe should be on 365, with Microsoft computers. Students can be on Google, but one thing to know is if you move anybody onto a Google-related platform, there are security that you can put in place, but there's additional features within 365 that give you a lot more capabilities, right? And some of the capabilities are considered communication compliance, right? What communication compliance is, we're not going to dive into that here, but I just wanted to bring it to light. Communication compliance not just regulatory compliance, communication compliance talks about identification of things like harassment, bullying, threats. So things that aren't covered under a regulatory body, but could be impactful to people, their lives, their relationships, their students, ability to identify it and action on it or prevent the information going through. It's just something I wanted to touch on. Again, not the topic here, but I think it's a critical area to focus on. Now, we'll jump back over to the slides, and just talk for a quick second. Why are labels a necessity? I think you've already understood a little bit about the risk, governance, risk, and compliance, identities, how it's understanding that, what labels look like and how we label things. We know that we can automatically label information. Let's talk about the dark web and let's start showing it, right? We've all heard about it. Some people have seen it, some people haven't. A lot of times it's where stolen data is shared, right? Identities are stolen and leaked here. Ransomware threat actors work there a lot, right? But they're starting to work on the clear web too. There's reasons to use the dark web. It's because you're routing and anonymizing your traffic to a certain point. So it makes it very difficult to find, right? So I don't know if you're on camera. I can't see. I'm just looking at this stuff. But anybody that's been on the dark web, raise your hand. It's a place that I think you should use a specialized and isolated system to access it. And let's do exactly that.
So as you're bringing that up, Jay, I did want to note too that there's a lot of detection connections out of the box for Microsoft Tenant, but you also, in your organization, you may have intellectual property, something that is uniquely your business. It's not a social security number, it's not a driver's license number, but it's particularly sensitive, especially something that you wouldn't want to have a bad actor or a competition getting their hands on. You can create custom trainable classifiers to identify that data and treat it the same way as though it was a detection such as a credit card number or a social security number. And this tagging and classification still comes into play, and you can protect that unique data within your organization.
Powerful, right? So here, what we're doing, you can see I use a box called Kali Linux. It's a specialized operating system. You have Microsoft Windows or Mac or Google, Chrome OS or whatever. This is Kali, and this is an isolated virtual machine that will wipe out afterwards. You can see the regular web is through Firefox. It's right here, right? And we'll use the regular web to take a look at Facebook. Facebook's on the clear web, and that's something to note. You will also take a look at a site called AMIA. Everybody's heard of Google. Everybody probably uses it, good or bad. AMIA is a search engine like Google for the dark web. What I'm going to look at in AMIA, the search engine for the dark web, and this isn't on the dark web, this is on the clear web. So AMIA.fi. Facebook actually has a dark web site. If you are in a position where maybe you live in a country or in a place that there's a lot of discourse and the government is trying to stop information flow or connection between you and people outside of the country, right? You can actually use Facebook's Onion site, their dark web site, to continue to communicate with your friends. So there are great uses for the dark web. There are also bad uses, nefarious uses. Another couple of points to note too is BBC, I believe, has their own dark web site. Right? It's a leak site. It's for whistleblowers, right? If you have an issue with an organization, if a government's doing things that they shouldn't be doing, you can whistleblow to BBC, Reuters. There's several of them. So there's really good purposes for it and really bad ones. Another thing too, and we'll look at AMIA again in a second. So once I've got my virtual machine up, I started Tor, which is the onion router. That's how we route our traffic through multiple hops to get to the dark web. I've started up my browser, which is the Tor browser, and this has allowed me to connect to the dark web. So now I'm on the dark web. But let's hop back over to the clear web. We'll use the search engine function because I think it's going to be relevant. And we're going to search for your favorite person. If I can spell my own last name wrong. And Jay Longley. I'm on the dark web, right? You found me. So Jay Longley, my dark website is Tacticalware. Every once in a while, I post most of my pilot videos as that. Let's take a look at that. So while we're using the clear web, Firefox, and I pulled up this link. It's an onion link. I can't view it on the clear web. This is my actual dark web server. So we'll go back over to Tor. We'll continue the conversation here. Again, live demo. So there's many things that I am. There's some things that I'm not, and some things I'm not is a web designer, right? I'm not, truth be told. But one of the reasons that this is very simple and very rudimentary is because being on the dark web, you don't have all the backend encoding, right? I don't have multiple vectors of attack where people can try to exploit different code on my system or try to exploit different packages that have been installed. There's a very simple, very secure lockdown single page with some information on there. For all intents and purposes for this demo, we're actually going to go to the exact same page. And this is essentially going to simulate what you would see on the dark web, threat actors. And I'd be more than happy to take anybody one-on-one and show them threat actors like Lockbit or Cloud Police or whoever, and really dive into that. But for all intents and purposes for this demo, this is the dark web.
And just to throw a quick disclaimer, if you're not familiar with the dark web, if you haven't gone through it yourself before, you don't have practice, absolutely go with a professional that has before, because it is essentially the Wild West version of the internet. So there's a lot of good things that obviously you can utilize the dark web for, as Jay had alluded to, but then obviously there's also a lot of bad actors that are out there. So how you connect, what you do, the process you go through to get there, and then what you search and the stuff you interact with are all part of those components. So if you're interested in doing it, please consult with a professional that's done it before and kind of work you through the process.
You'll find a lot of the threat actors will actually try to exploit your system while you visit their page also. My system has, again, no coding in the back end because I want to lock it down and protect it. I use it for demos, really. So here, this simulates a data leak, right? State of Rhode Island's data leak. It's not, but it simulates it. Whatever data leak out there, you name the organization, similar in nature. As you can see here, we'll say that this is RIGCS. This is my demo tenant. This is one company. And I have sensitivity labels. I showed you those emails with the sensitivity labels on them, right? And I showed you that I could open up the PDFs and I can open up the Word documents. So here, we'll just save it. Oh, and this makes my browser extra big. So let me see if I can shrink it to save the file. Here we go. We'll open it. This has sensitivity labels. So this document, in theory, that's living on this environment in the dark web should inspect the world around it. Who's logged into me? Where am I in the world? Do they have access to open me? Right? And what it's doing, I'm not even using Microsoft Office. I'm trying to open it, and the LibreOffice is looking at it and saying, nope, the Office file is corrupt. Because during that fraction of a second that you just saw, inspected the world around it, sent it to Microsoft, Microsoft said, absolutely do not let them in there. And you can see I'm denied. I'm not allowed to do it. And I'll show you in a second that I can actually do it on the system that I'm at right now. So this one, very similar, has no sensitivity labels. We all know what sensitivity labels are now. This one is not protected with it. This is like most organizations' documents. They don't have sensitivity labels on there. Right, let's see. I have to look around my camera. No sensitivity labels. Guess what? Here you go. You can open it. Because there's nothing protecting that data. I don't own that data because the sensitivity labels are on there, right? So as you can see, and we can go on, and I just want to be, I want to be cognizant of time. You can see that there's ownership of the data and not ownership of the data. So let's actually hop over to this computer. I'm going to go to the same dark web, except I'm on the network with it, right? So I don't have to go to the full Longley onion site and all that. I want to stay away from the dark web on this PC. But again, so I'm going through the backend channels on it. We'll go back to the same demo, .html. And I'll scroll down. We'll go right back to that same page, the same page that you saw right here. Well, this is the actual Office, the same page you saw right here. So we're on the back end system of it. You can see that I'm connected directly to it. You can see I'm connected to it on the front end using the onions, but it's the same exact site, same page, everything. Here, I'll download the RIGCS tenant. I'm on an RIGCS tenant configured PC because, again, my demo site. I'll open up the document. And there, I can get into it. It was created within this. It's listed and labeled as highly confidential, right? Inspected the world around it. Jay can access it. He's on the right system, the right place in the world. There you go. One with no labels. Right there, no labels. It doesn't matter. I still got into it, right? It was saved and is created in LibreWriter. You just saw the exact same file from the dark web using the other computer. Let's take a look at Envisions. This is not connected to Envision's demo tenant. Envision's tenant, sorry, has my demo tenant is not connected to Envision's tenant. There's separation, right? So Envision sensitivity labels, in theory, shouldn't work on RAGCS unless specifically authorized. So let's take a look at this one. Envision sensitivity labels. It's inspecting the world around it. It's saying, hey, you're on this system. You're in a location that we recognize. We recognize your location because you're Jay and you work for Envision. You're on a system we don't recognize. So what we want you to do at this point is authenticate. Prove to us that you are Envision. It's challenging me to authenticate. If I logged in as Envision, I can open it. So something key to note there, right? So you own your data. And I think that's really the power of this. So here, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge everybody on this call, okay? Some of you already have sensitivity labels and some of you don't. If you have an iPhone or if you have a regular phone or whatever, I'm going to ask you to open up your phone. I want you to tell me if you actually own your data. So as we look at this, I'm opening up Outlook. I don't know if you can see it. There's Outlook. I'm going to log into my Outlook. So I'm on Outlook. I'll create a new message. So you all know how to create the new message. On the side, you can see the plus. You see the plus over there? Click on that plus. I have to turn it sideways, I think, because of the glare. You'll see add sensitivity. Click on add sensitivity. If you don't have sensitivity, if you don't see labels there, do you own your data? In my opinion, I would say probably not, or unless you're using a Google version of it that was paid for and highly configured as well. So that itself is something to take home, right? Do you own your data? If your organization gets attacked, can you change the labeling on it? Can you revoke access to it? You've seen the dark web. You've seen where we can do with it, right?
Yeah, I think when you get into situations where you've had some kind of a security or data exposure, that's really when this obviously is that kind of last line of defense with regards to the data. Obviously, no, all security tools are based on layers of defense. So having all the things to make sure bad actors aren't getting into the systems and aren't able to get access to things of a sensitive nature. But in the event that they've been able to kind of work their way around these different security controls you have in place, and that data has been exfiltrated or leaves your environment and leaves your four walls, into the point of many times ransomware attacks, things like that, a lot of the leverage that ransomware actors are utilizing is that the data is removed from your system and that the threat is the threat of releasing that data to the world. Having these labels, having these classifications in place in order to lock down that data makes it so that they, while may have initially possession of the contents themselves, they have no ability to get into what's inside of it. So they lose kind of that ability to leverage a releaser of that information. So it really kind of nerfs that engagement that they're trying to perpetrate. Having this in place is becoming much more of a commonplace and really getting to the point of becoming table stakes as far as being able to protect your data, have control over it regardless of where it resides. And this is something that can help obviously alleviate some of those risks that you have, but even not only with a threat actor taking it, but possibly or people within your organization having different layers, because you may have data of a sensitive nature. There's no reason to expose social security numbers to your entire organization. Lock that down to just the departmental personnel that require that access and visibility if you have to have it at all. And then this way, any accidental exposure, it's tax time. How many people are downloading their W-2s to their OneDrives or to their local stores in your environment? And now that level of exposure gets expanded into your environment. Having these types of automatic classifiers, automatic labeling can help rectify or help reduce the risk. And it can be done in many different ways. There's so many different ways in order to kind of implement the stepping process based on identification and action that correspond to it, that it can be something that can help minimize impact to your organization, reduce risk, and provide visibility to you that you can definitively say, this data or this classification or type of data does not exist within your organization. Or if it does, here's the levels of controls and due diligence and oversight, that governance piece that you have in order to reduce the overall risk of this data being present.
Great segue, because challenge number 2 is, are you compliant, right? So, perfect way to jump into that. So we talked about sensitivity labels before, right? I showed you the sensitivity labels. Not only that, we've shown you the data classification Content Explorer, right? We can look at the sensitive data within the organization. We know we have it, right? And we know through sensitivity labels and various other methods that we're securing it. So inquire with your teams. Are you compliant? Not only are you compliant, can they prove it, right? Take a look at Content Explorer. See the sensitivity. I know most organizations will say, no, we don't accept PCI data. We don't have sensitive HIPAA related data, but I guarantee you do. And that's how you check, right? So inquire with your teams, your tech teams, your business teams. It all falls under governance, risk, and compliance. It's a business-driven decision to accept that data or move the organization into those places and adhere to those compliance regulations. Are you compliant? Inquire with your teams. Because you don't want to be the next company that's on the news tomorrow, right? I certainly don't, please. And then the last challenge, not only do you have to concern yourself with your organization, inquire with your vendors, right? How are your vendors securing your information? What's your supply chain risk? We'll talk hyper-locally again. The supply chain for the state of Rhode Island, for HealthSource RI and some of those other various ones, the supply chain attack was Deloitte. They attacked Deloitte to get into Rhode Island, right? Check your supply chain. Don't just accept the letter of attestation as a blanket statement and think that you're safe, right? Don't just put out a contract, say that you require it. Have your vendors prove that they are compliant. Talk to them. Have that ongoing relationship. Hold them accountable if they're not, or reassess if they're the right organization to work with moving forward. Because don't let what happened hyper locally here happen to you.
Right? I think you make a great point, Jay, and that's really comes down to that third party and even fourth party risk assessment, and having a program in place for your organization to identify the businesses and partners that you're doing business with that may even potentially have access to data of a sensitive nature that may impact your clients or your individual employees or personnel within your organization. Having that due diligence to not just accept a piece of paper that says, look at the checkbox we have and the big stamp that we have that says we're compliant with XYZ, but actually digging beneath the surface a bit. They can sometimes be a little bit complicated. Obviously, there are services out there and there are programs, and obviously we can always assist with that as well. But make sure that you're doing your due diligence with those third parties, because those third parties tend to be methods by which bad actors are utilizing to gain access to large organizations. We see it all the time, where providers are the point of entry in many cases to these types of threats.
Excellent points, Manny. And we're here for you. So I just want to end it on, let us know how we can help you. Manny's a great resource. I'm a resource as well. Envision is your go-to partner on this. We understand this. We've been in this place for years, years before most, if not all of our local competitors. And I want to work with you to ensure that you're compliant, ensure that the business has the compliance obligations already taken care of, right? Take that off your plate. Don't worry about that. But let us work with you. Let us help navigate through through this journey. And we're more than happy to bring these demos to really make the information impactful to whatever level the organization needs it, right? Because again, this is a business decision. It's not necessarily an IT tech decision. It's business made this decision. IT is trying to support that. So let us help you. We're here for it. And with that, if anybody has any questions, let's open it up to the floor. Quiet group, huh? Yeah. So, all right. Well,
Yeah, and something else to note, we'll throw out there. It looks like David, you may have been trying to demo it in the chat. Was how these types of classifications and restrictions can be extended to chats as well, within a Teams chat, within a channel or a meeting chat as well. I think that was a great example. And yes, I think Jared, you had your hand up first.
Sure. So not necessarily a question, more of an observation. So I see, David put a message in the chat that the message was blocked due to organizational policy. But even though it does say that, I did receive like a little pop-up that I could see his message where he said, "This is my social security. Hi, this is my social security number 035, whatever." So it didn't fully actually block that message from being received.
and it's not supposed to initially, right? So that's the thing, right? So David depends on the licensing that you have, and that's a for example, right? So as you put this information in there, David, as a policy for Envision, is not supposed to be putting that information in there. David, you're not supposed to do it, right? Slap on the hand, you did something wrong. But again, slap on the hand, you did something wrong. What beyond that is protecting David long term? Nothing. And that was critical to understand because now you saw that the system automatically understood that David did this. Yes, it popped up for a few seconds, and within that time period, the system caught it, and then now you have that block message. So that system is removing the oops that employees make, right? So I think that's a critical point. So employees can still make that oops, and the system will catch it. Depends on how you have it configured. We've had policies where I've sent, my credit card to our purchasing team to do, purchase a SAN for me, JBot for me. I sent it, took a picture, I sent it in there, and within seconds, same thing. We're not a PCI compliant organization. We don't want to hold that data. We removed it from the system. So, a lot of great points there. Go ahead, David.
I purposely did that, Jay, because I knew it would do it, and I knew the system would
Perfect.
identify that I did something wrong, and it said, "Hey, that's wrong. Take it away."
Yeah, yep, perfect. There's different levels of licensing within Microsoft too, and I have a counterpart that can speak to you about that. That as you type in information, will identify it and encrypt it or wrap regulatory as you're doing it on the fly. There's other levels of licensing depending on where you kind of fall in that mix that will scan it once a day and then wrap those compliance regulations around it once a day. And then there's some that just leave you completely alone, right? So it all depends what makes the most sense for the organization. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. We appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again in the future. And again, more than happy to show anybody, dark web and dive into some little more hyper-local, more impactful things, not in a webinar setting or a Teams meeting. Be more than happy to show you if you've gone through an event, what you're exposed to. So, all right, great. Thanks. Appreciate it, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.